Okay, hello everybody. Right, so welcome to another round of the good, the bad, and the ugly. So today we are discussing something that has been buzzing around since the latest UN climate change conference or the COP26. And today we are going to discuss nuclear energy. Right. So we all know about climate change. Now, whether that's something we believe in or not, now we may or may not be discussing it today. So later it may come out in our discussion, right? But in any case, the assumption here is that, or the starting point of today's discussion is that climate change is happening, and one thing that can slow it or even stopping it is by changing the way we produce electricity. So, and currently the way we produce electricity is from coal, right? uh, or non-renewable uh, sources of energy. Coal is one of them, right? And unfortunately, they produce uh, harmful gases like carbon dioxide, which contributes to climate change. So coal is bad, right? So alternatives, well, there's the renewable energy like solar and wind energy, but these kinds of energy they are not that reliable because they are dependent on weather conditions and they just don't produce enough energy to meet demands, right? Especially now with growing demands all around the world. So it takes up a lot of and it also takes up a lot of space, right, to build the necessary infrastructure. And in many parts of the world, Singapore including, right, space is actually limited, right? So not everyone can afford the space to build these infrastructures. So what else is there? Well, there's been talks about biomass, but biomass is actually not clean, unfortunately, because they actually produce harmful byproducts. So this is where nuclear energy comes in, right? So if we, yeah, so this is where nuclear energy comes in. So and we often hear that it's good for two main reasons. Number one, now it is able to produce a lot of a large amount of energy, right? So meaning it can actually meet the world's demand, right? So this definitely beats renewable energy. Second, it is also considered clean energy because it doesn't produce harmful gases or harmful byproducts like carbon dioxide, right, which contributes to climate change. So this beats the conventional way of uh, of how we produce energy, which is by using coal or even the biofuel. All right, so that's nuclear energy. So that's something that's been discussed right recently. Now, however, the main challenge of nuclear energy is public perception. Now, people think it's bad because of what has happened in Chernobyl and also in Fukushima in Japan, right? So people are really worried about the risk. So is nuclear energy really worth it, right? Uh, what if a blowout happens? You know, yeah. So that's why we are one of the things that we are discussing today is nuclear energy. Should we or should we not consider it as a way of producing energy, right? So what are your takes, guys?
Um, I, I have a feeling that we will transition into nuclear energy. It's just a matter of time. Yeah, it will happen one way or other because fossil fuels is doing a lot of damage to. It's creating a lot of emission currently. So we will eventually move to nuclear energy. So it's just a matter of time. We need a catalyst. So like what you mentioned, it's the image of nuclear energy that we have that is not good, like Chernobyl, Fukushima, things like that. If we can change the public's perception of it, and if we find a way to store store uranium, after once you use uranium for nuclear energy, it's considered toxic waste. If you can find a proper place to store it, then I think, yeah, nuclear energy is a green light, man. It's good to go. That's my opinion.
Yeah, I Don, your thanks for pointing that out regarding the byproduct, right? So when you
Yeah.
produce nuclear energy, you have that radioactive waste, right?
Mm.
Because it uses uranium. I think currently, or at least as far as I know,
Mm.
uh, yes, it's a problem in the sense that we need a storage space for that. But I think the reactors around the world, they have been successful in doing that.
Yeah.
And yeah, right. I mean, when it comes to the disasters related to nuclear energy or the blowouts, they are
Hmm.
not related to the to know to the radioactive waste being released.
Right. Right.
It's about the nuclear reactor itself, right?
Mm.
So yeah.
France is using nuclear energy,
Yeah.
and I think they're doing a great job with it. Not much backlash or anything.
Yeah.
And other countries like Slovakia,
Mm,
Ukraine.
yeah.
So so far, it's not a bad thing at all, lah.
Yeah, correct. So that's why you have your Chernobyl and Fukushima, the two big disasters,
Mm.
right? Uh, but these are, two out of so many other nuclear reactors out
Mm.
there in the world,
Mm.
right? So that's why. But I think again, the idea that, hey, look, the risk, if a blowout were to happen, the damage is going to be so great. So I think probably, maybe that's where the like what you
The
said,
fear
the bad
comes in.
image, yeah, the fear comes in,
Mm.
right? So is
Mm.
it really worth it? Uh, yeah. So see many thoughts.
Well, yeah, I think what you guys said is 100% true. Like if you were to compare the climate related deaths from extracting coal, from gas and everything else, even solar and wind, right? Nuclear will be the safest actually. So there's this like very warped perception of how dangerous it is, because literally I think it's literally almost zero deaths per what's
Mm,
that nucleus from for example, like death from accidents, the death from pollution, right? The
mm,
death per trillion watt per hour for nuclear is like 0.01 compared to solar, compared to natural gas, compared to coal and all that, which is much higher. I think coal is one of the highest, approaching probably like 30 deaths per TWH. So in that regard, yeah, that's probably true. But I'm thinking of how it would be, I guess, put into place, because okay, the waste management is also one thing, and then also the building up the infrastructure is another thing. Because it's so safe, right? And it's the safest form of energy out there, uh, in terms of deaths and accidents from construction and use. But I think
mm,
also at the same time, it's going to be way more expensive than any other
mm,
sort of form of energy. So I'm trying to think of how would countries all over the world kind of implement this if cost is going to be such a huge factor. Because I think the only um, other form of energy that is more expensive, right, than nuclear would be offshore wind energy.
mm,
But then the thing is, with offshore wind energy, right, it's very novel. It's still in its infancy. It's still not developed. We've already tried to develop nuclear energy like from what, 50, 80 years ago. And
mm,
it's been an ongoing process, and it's still very expensive. Whereas this offshore wind energy, yeah, you can say that it's more expensive than nuclear, but then it's only very recent that they have developed this. As time goes by, as they make more developments, as they increase a lot more supply, we can see the price dropping. But with nuclear, right, one of the things that is still very off-putting for a lot of people who can see past the safety aspect would be the cost, because
yeah.
it is very expensive to manage all their safety requirements. Although it is one of the safest, right? But its safety aspect is also why it's so expensive, because you have to put in a lot of things in place to avoid another Fukushima, to avoid another Chernobyl, because you have to think about all the cooling measures when you're using these kind of facilities. You have to think of all of the implementations you need to put in, how you're going to manage the waste to make sure it doesn't go to seep into any rivers and then poison all the fish, or get harmed by radiation or whatever. So that is, I think, one of the biggest drawback for nuclear.
Yeah, I think cost is definitely, a key consideration, and making governments think twice again the idea of whether it's worth it and whatnot, right? But we talked about space also. Space not just in terms of building infrastructure, but also space in terms of storing the 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 byproducts, right? The waste. So again, and for countries that are not that huge, that don't have space to spare, like Singapore, right? So I think there has been this nuclear energy was in fact was considered, but at the end of the day I think this was sometime back, I can't remember which decade, but the government decided, hey look, we don't have the expertise, right, and we don't have the infrastructure, and like what you said, right, same the cost, right, is just too much, and at that time we were not that developed as we are today. So we decided not to go ahead with it. We didn't do much with regard to developing nuclear technology. But in the region, I think one country that was looking at it was actually Indonesia. And if I'm not wrong, there's some uh, collaboration between the countries in the region. And Indonesia is seen to be the country that has expert knowledge, right? And there has been again this just hearsay from someone that has been someone I know, right, who has been investigating the risk assessment with regard to nuclear energy. There has been talks about building this a common nuclear reactor, a huge one somewhere in Indonesia, right, to be shared among the region. So that's one way, I guess, to cut costs and also to share knowledge. If let's say we don't have that expert knowledge, so a collaboration would be one option. But then again, if I can throw a curveball, right? So then, if that, I mean, yes, we talked about improvements in how we can reduce the blowouts and things like that. But if a blowout were to happen nonetheless, then who would be most impacted by that, right? It would not be us. It would be the locals who would be, we would be the locals, right? Where the reactors are located at. So that's one. Now the other thing that I want us to think about would be the actual uranium, the raw resource material that's needed, right, for the nuclear energy. So this is something that's not really highlighted, I think, in public discussions. So often when we talk about the challenges with nuclear energy, it's got to do with the cost and the risk, right? But the risk aside, if we can manage it well, then that's great. The cost, if we can manage it, that's great as well. But what about the raw resource, the uranium itself? We can't run away from that. When we mine uranium, that's radioactive material, right? And if you look at where uraniums are being mined, they are actually in uh, not in France. Okay, they are in, I think, Canada, Australia. These are the two developed countries that I know that actually uh, exports uranium. Then there's India, one of them, Niger, and a few other, I think, African countries, right? And Russia as well, right? So, but what has not been done is actually extensive research, extensive studies on the impacts of mining this uranium, the health impact on local population, the impact on the environment as well. So, for example, Canada, right? The government, I think there has been calls for the government to actually do a proper study on the impact on the environment, on the rivers, on the waters, right? Whether it's contaminated, whether it will be polluted by the radioactive waste when they mine the uranium. But the government simply refused to do that. And then again, you can't have independent researchers doing that research if, let's say, the sites are off limits, right? If the government refused to grant that access to outsiders in the first place, they are controlled by the government. So yeah, so I think that adds yeah, so that's something that we don't really talk about. Whether we want to talk about it, we don't want to talk about, I don't know. Maybe it's I mean, if you want to talk about conspiracy, like what Don was saying earlier on, right? So it's going to happen anyway, right? So we just focus on the risk can be managed. We talk about the cost can be managed. Okay, look, these two are, problem solved. Let's move on. Let's give a thumbs up to nuclear energy, but we don't want to talk about the other side, the other challenges that's that exists with nuclear energy, which is the mining of the uranium itself. Yeah, so those are the two things I think. The the u- the the impact if on a local population if a blowout were to happen. This is especially with regard to uh, if let's say the reactor is shared among, let's say, different countries, right? Or even local population versus the people who actually benefit from the power, right? So that's one, the unequal impact if let's say a blowout to happen. And the second one would be again the impact of uranium mining. So these are the two things that I think we have not been talking about. So yeah. Well, I mean, when I say we don't talk about it, I mean not just the three of us, but it's not being discussed openly in, I think, a lot of media. That's missing, I think. Yeah. So,
When we talk about this Fukushima accident, right? This
yeah.
blowout, were there any deaths involved? Did anyone die? Number of people? Was the blowout so serious, or was it just blown out to the public that, oh, it's this is dangerous? You get what I mean?
Even the impacts, is it?
Yeah, the impact. Is it really that serious? Because there were
Yeah.
no deaths that happened for this Fukushima accident. No
Yeah.
one died.
But I think there was impact on the environment, and then there were impact
Mm-hmm.
on health. But it wasn't as long lasting as Chernobyl. Yeah.
Okay, okay.
Yeah. You're right on the front. Mm. Yeah. So anyway, so with regard to that, so I don't know. So I think one thing what we have not really think about, I guess, would be, so if nuclear energy, if let's say, right, is there any other option, right? So I think it's because of there seems to be a lack of option. That's why, you know, nuclear is the best of what of whatever limited choices that we have left, right?
Mm-hmm.
We talk about renewable energy, it's just not enough, right? So let's just sweep the dust under the rug, and let's ignore these other problems that we may have. Hopefully we don't have it, you know, and then just proceed with nuclear energy. I think that's what's going to happen. Like what Don said, I agree with you, Don. I think, yeah,
Yeah,
nuclear
but
energy is,
something has to push the transition.
yeah.
Something has to something has to happen. A big, yeah, like me. I don't know, man. I don't know. Something big has to happen so that people will just transition into this.
Mm. So how can that happen?
I don't know. I don't know. World War?
World War, a nuclear war? Oh no,
No,
that
not
would
a nuclear war, like a normal world war.
conflict
Yeah,
with China and US probably.
something has to happen, then people will be more. Yeah, it will happen like eventually. Like, this is a matter of time.
So what's the big push, right? And how? Yeah.
I think one of the things also that people are quite reluctant on going nuclear is that the opportunity cost that comes with it, right? Because when we talk about achieving the climate goals to hit a net zero, there are three ways, right? We could either find a way to make coal less dirty. So that could be building like certain carbon capture plants or filters, so that when coal is being extracted and being mined into more usable forms of energy, that whatever greenhouse gas it releases gets trapped in there. But then the technology for that isn't really up there yet. Another solution could be like building better batteries that's capable of storing energy from renewable sources, because the problem with renewable sources like solar and wind is that sometimes the sun doesn't always shine, sometimes there's no wind, right? And especially if you want to look at the time of day of where humans need the most energy, it's usually after work, after 5, after 6, where the sun already set, when the winds may not be particularly strong. So if let's say we can find a way to have these better capture and carbon technologies, or have better batteries that can store those renewable energies better, so that it is not based on like intermittency, then we really don't have to go nuclear. But then if let's say we invest all our money, and then we know nuclear is going to be very expensive, we invest all our money, right? And then suddenly one genius 50 years later comes up with a way to boost the carbon technology, or to find a way to store these renewable energies better, then all the money that you've invested into nuclear will just go to waste, because these other type of forms are much easier to use. Like for coal, the only drawback is that it's a lot of greenhouse gases. But if you fix that, then there's no worries. For solar and wind, very, very little drawbacks, but it's only that it's not a very reliable source. With nuclear, it's very reliable. And if you can build it up to scale for everyone to use and do it cheaply, that's fine. But then you have to think about the waste that you have to deal with. So nuclear seems to have a very, very strong opportunity cost. If let's say, yeah, you do build it, reliability is an issue, cost is an issue, the scale is an issue, but then you got to still think about the waste. I think that's why one of the reasons why people would still rather push for renewables over nuclear would be that, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I think, yeah, the opportunity cost, right? You were saying, yeah, this definitely is a huge thing for governments to consider, for us to think about as well, right? So after investing so much money, and then suddenly, hey, look, another option comes out, there'll be like oh, bummer, huge bummer. Like, so do we ignore and just press on because we've invested so much on nuclear energy, you know? But one of the things that I think we are looking at is also because the urgency, right? With regard to climate change. So there's what I've been hearing a lot recently is that, we need immediate action because climate change is happening so fast. And we can't wait, right? We can't wait for new technology. We can't wait for new findings and whatever, right? So we have nuclear energy. We know it. We have, like what Don was saying just now, France has been doing it. The whole no, so it's something that we should embark on it as soon as possible. Yeah, so I think that's one other thing that's a message that's been going around, I guess, the urgency.
But I think with France, right, there's also a question that comes up to mind, because I think they rely 70% of its energy from nuclear, for electricity uses, right? But I think they also recently closed down 2 nuclear plants, and they are on track, right, of reducing their reliance of nuclear to 50% by 2035. I see some articles written about this saying that it's political, but some also talking about the waste management and how that like keeping up and subsidizing this nuclear industry, right, is in the long run going to damage France much more, because you got to think about how many hundreds of years that you have to store this waste, where you're going to put it, and also all the dangers that comes with transport, which also kind of like could be a critique of your earlier solution with using Indonesia as a hub for nuclear power, whatever. Because when you have to transport all the nuclear fuel to your country, like to Singapore, right? You have to pay for the transport cost, and that transport cost comes with a lot of risk. Like what if you're coming through this maritime strait, where all the ships are passing through, and then the ship comes into contact with another ship, or there's damage, or if one of the tanks fall off and then it drops into the ocean, what is going to happen with the whole pollution, with the whole fuel that's going to contaminate in the whole sea? I think it's going to be very, 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 very expensive, because like no one would want to kind of take that risk, right? How will you manage the insurance? How will you manage if things go wrong? And again, like it comes to that. Once you're done with the fuel, where are you going to store it in Singapore? Do you ship it back to Indonesia? When is Indonesia going to store it?
Yeah, then there'd be like, it's like dumping everything on somebody else's backyard, right? So yeah. Yeah, I think the other thing I think wondering whether it's a possible way to look at the problem that we have now is actually reducing the energy that we consume, or rather we need. So like you were saying, I guess developing technology that can reduce energy. I mean, the energy required for to power our devices, right? Uh, yeah. So for example, lighting, I think has been a good example. So the transition to LEDs, right? So I think that's one on. Though that's a one, I guess a small, small scale kind of example, but yeah, something that we have not explored. But nonetheless, there's new things coming up. There's the what do you call that? The metaverse coming up, right? So I think this would, if you were to envision a world where we are all where we are also living in a metaverse, everyone's involved. So I think that would actually definitely drive the demand for electricity or energy. So then can we also think about ways to minimize or maximize the energy that comes out of whatever source that we have, so that we don't require to that much energy to be produced, if you get what I'm trying to say, right? So anyway, yeah. So electricity saving measures, I guess that's one. Again, that's on the consumers s- side of things. Well, anyway, any other thoughts, guys?
Oh, not from me, man.
So Don, you still think nuclear? I mean, you were saying that nuclear is definitely going to be, you know, we are is the definitely the future, right? So when do you
Yeah, it's
think this will?
definitely the future.
But
When I don't know, man. You see, right now we're at the beginning stage of it. I would say, like,
mm,
uh, we just transition into electricity. Like, for example, if you look at our cars, right, we're just transitioning into electric cars. It's not
mhm,
something. It's with Tesla. It's something new, but
yeah,
we're getting there. So more and more things will be, you know, will be based on Tesla's energy.
mm.
So as time goes, it will happen, lah. Yeah. So that's I don't know when. If I were to pick an exact time, I can't tell you, but it will happen, lah. Maybe 50 years from now or 100 years from now. Yeah, it will happen.
Sim, what do you think? So will nuclear be definitely be part of the future, or at least for our future, anytime soon?
I
Not
think
any.
uh, as a mainstay or being a staple for your country, I think it's going to be very hard, especially for Singapore, Maybe if it's on a smaller scale, if we have a very, 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 very small scale kind of nuclear plant that makes up like 10-20%, that is profitable and safe, yeah, sure. But to completely replace fossil fuels, I definitely can't see how that's going to happen, because, you know, like what Don was saying about how we have to extract all of these raw materials, and also these raw materials also need other raw materials to function. Like, it's not just about the what's that called? It's not just about the uranium. It's also you have to use copper, you have to use oil, you have to use quite a lot of silver, and so many other like cobalt and things like that, which is going to come at another green expense, right? Like when you extract all these other raw materials, you also have to go to create air pollution, and then you're going to harm a lot of those like indigenous people. Like, for example, if you're going to extract all the materials from Africa, all of the laborers who go through this process are going to be badly damaged, and all of the greenhouse gases that they're going to emit is also going to come at a cost. I think I saw this other study that they did talking about like electric vehicles, for one, not even going to nuclear, right? That you have to drive, I think, at least 120,000 miles or km to hit the same efficiency of a 60,000 mile driven fossil fuel powered car, and which basically means that it's not as it's not as green in that sense, right? But the whole idea of switching to the electric car is that hoping that people will keep it for a very long time, because if they're only using it for about however long that it takes to hit that type of mileage, which is around maybe 9 years, for example, then and they sell the car or they scrap the car, right? Then whatever that goes into it will be a total waste. That's why if you have to project it in a very, very long term scale, where you are driving the car over 9 to 10 years, then it will make sense, and then it will be considered more green than a fossil fuel powered car. And I guess if let's say we were to have that all settled, so then it just comes back to the waste. Like, what are we going to do to waste? It's toxicity and radiation can last up to like over a few hundred years, so that is going to be a huge problem. Do we just like dig it into the ground, and then how do we ensure that it doesn't seep through, or if, for example, in the case of war or whatever, if some enemy bombs the area and then it leaks out everything off, like there's a lot of things to consider about whether or not our sort of technologies are even up there yet to kind of transport all of these nuclear plants to our power grid, is also one thing that we have to think about. All of the other coolants that we need to make sure the plants doesn't overheat, to avoid another Chernobyl. Yeah, basically stuff like that. It's I think it's going to be very hard to kind of see it being the future where it replaces all fossil fuels, but maybe as a sort of intermittent energy source, or sort of a backup to renewables. Yeah, sure. I could definitely see it being there for its place.
Yeah, so you're talking about just now you did talk about something, a small kind of version, kind of a nuclear reactor. So actually, what's happening now is there is development, new technology with regard. I think they call it the SMRs, small modular reactors, I think. Yeah, so Singapore is doing some research on it, but it's again globally it's still a development stage, still a research stage, not a commercial yet. Supposedly safer, so we may do away with the initial idea of getting another country to host the reactors for us. But again, these are development, and I think officially Singapore has not considered, at least again, these are officially, they have not considered nuclear as a viable option yet. But definitely, research and on the way, and studies are being done as well. Yeah, so will it happen? I would agree with Don. I think it will happen, but in the near future, I think may not be, right? Maybe not in 50 years time, probably later, unless there is. I think there's a trigger. I think one of us was talking about a war, maybe. I mean, the catalyst, right? So what would be the catalyst? Yeah, who knows? When when really this, we need something immediate, and things needs to be done, and then, yeah, who knows, right? Yeah, but that's my take. I think it will not happen anytime soon. It will happen, but not anytime soon though. Yeah, with regard to the impact on the environment, the impact on, yeah, so with regard to the environment, to the impact on the environment, I think we are just going to ignore all of that, and then, just proceed like what we are doing now. Actually, there are a lot of things that we are doing now that, we don't really want to know about the impact on the environment. So for example, the food that we eat and things like that, right? So I think that's going to happen with nuclear energy as well. So we're just going to ignore the impact. Yeah, so that's it. If there are no other thoughts or any other points from any of us, that's the good, the bad, and the ugly of nuclear energy, right? So that's it for today. That's it for today's this session. Till the next time. Bye bye.